in the newsroom. France awoke this Monday with a new president.
Ils viennent tous de voir le visage de François Hollande. Ça y est, François Hollande monte sur scène, acclamé par toute la place de la Bastille.
Mes amis,
Voilà, on entend bien.
It had gone midnight when François Hollande stepped on stage at Paris's Place de la Bastille. He had waited for the polls to close in the home constituency of Tulle in the center of France before returning to the capital as the first socialist elected president in 24 years. The victory by no means a landslide. 51.6% of the vote for Hollande, and for many, it was more a referendum against the incumbent, unpopular conservative Nicolas Sarkozy. For Hollande and his staff, now comes the hard part, convincing the voters in next month's legislative elections to give him the mandate to make tough decisions. Who is François Hollande? Does he have what it takes to lead? He'll have to hit the ground running when he's sworn in May 15th, smack in the middle of a crisis where the fate of Europe's common currency perhaps hangs in the balance. Today in the France 24 debate, we get acquainted with Président Hollande. And with us to talk about it, New York Times Bureau Chief Steve Erlinger. Thanks for being with us. Also with us, Patrick Vignal of the Reuters news agency, Ulrike Kollermann, former Paris correspondent for German news agency DPA, and Jim Shields, who teaches at Aston University. Thank you for being with us. Your comments, by the way, coming in on the France 24 debate Facebook page and on Twitter. You can find us at François F24. Multitaskers could even watch and tweet using the hashtag LiveF24. Now, nearly 90 minutes after the polls closed, the man some had called the accidental candidate, the socialist previous frontrunner Dominique Strauss-Kahn, seeing his political fortunes implode in sex cases, Hollande coming ahead, a mainstay of French politics for a decade, and for the first time, donning the clothes of a president-elect.
We are not just any country on the planet, any nation in the world. We are France. As the President of the Republic, it will be up to me to carry the aspirations always carried by the people of France. Peace, freedom, respect, the ability to give to people the right to emancipate themselves from dictatorships or break away from the illegitimate rules of corruption. So yes, everything I will do, everywhere in the world, will be in the name of the values of the Republic.
And there you saw in that speech in Tulle, Patrick Vignal, of course, François Hollande, for you as a Frenchman, is someone you've seen for decades. But did you discover someone new in that speech?
Not really, not yet, but now we will find out. I mean, he's a relatively unknown quantity in many aspects.
For you?
Yeah, for us as well. Because, I mean, he's a politician, we know where he comes from, but as a statesman, we don't know him, and we will find out very, very, very soon.
Were there any clues, Steve Erlinger, in what he said in that speech?
Well, he wants, because he's a socialist, he has to be in the vanguard of something. So he wants to be in the vanguard of the challenge to German austerity programs. He talked about Europe. I think for the French, he will be a more comforting, inclusive figure. I mean, his tone, his manner. On the world stage, it's very hard to know. And as we say, he's going to be tested soon. He'll have to talk to Angela Merkel very, very soon. Then he goes to Washington. He has to talk to the G8. Then he goes to a NATO summit where he's already made a challenge to the consensus. So we'll see how well he bears up on that score.
What surprised you, Ulrike Kollermann, when you saw François Hollande again make that acceptance speech, come out no longer as the candidate but the president-elect?
Yeah, I think his scope is very limited. He maybe tries to prepare the voters. At one point, he will have to prepare them that he has to take some tough measures, but he's not there yet. I mean, he is still trying to distribute his sweets. Like there's another election coming up, so for the time being, he can't be tough. But at one point, he will have to be.
You agree with that, Jim Shields? He's going to have to play his cards close to his chest until the legislative elections, which of course follow, which are crucial, and those coming up next month.
Yes, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose, and I think the poetry has now stopped for François Hollande, and the prose is going to be tough. There's no doubt about that. If you look at his agenda over the next 2 months even, it's a very full agenda, both at home and abroad. And of course, he faces different challenges in both of those departments.
All right, and before we look at the prose, a word about the poetry. François Hollande, who critics on the campaign trail called Flamby, which is a popular brand of caramel pudding, he preferred to spin himself as Mr. Normal.
He ran as Mr. Normal, but taking over as the next French president is anything but normal. And as the 2012 campaign progressed, François Hollande didn't hide his ambitions.
I will be the president to put an end to privilege, because I can't accept that some get ever richer while 8 million people live under the poverty line.
Hollande is certainly at ease on the campaign trail, and his easygoing nature belies a long-standing determination. His mother told French television in 2003 that her son long believed he was right for the top job.
He used to say something that always made us laugh. When I grow up, I'll be president. We didn't believe that at all, and still don't.
Hollande didn't take any chances with his education, earning a place at the elite National School of Administration, which grooms future leaders. It was during his studies that he met Ségolène Royal, his partner for 30 years. They had 4 children together and built parallel careers. He became an advisor to François Mitterrand and then an MP. The mix of private and political drew media interest, attention that was focused on Royal as she became minister. Hollande instead chose to climb Socialist Party ranks, first close to Jacques Delors and then Lionel Jospin, becoming party leader in 1997. He held the fort while Jospin led the socialist bid for the presidency. When that ended in failure in 2002, Hollande stepped in to fill the leadership void. In 2005, the no in a national referendum on the European Constitution dealt Hollande's stature a serious blow. He had to stand aside as his partner Royal emerged as the party's candidate for the 2007 race. Their private life was already in tatters. An official separation was announced in the wake of her defeat. In 2008, Hollande ended his stint as party leader, and his time out of the spotlight allowed him to change his image. He lost 10 kilos and began to promote a more serious, statesman-like persona. He announced his bid for the socialist candidacy in March 2011 before any of his rivals. Dominique Strauss-Kahn's arrest in New York boosted his chances, and he emerged as favourite ahead of his successor as party boss Martine Aubry. Having seen off his rivals from within the party, his focus was on beating the incumbent president. Despite never holding a ministerial post, Hollande has clinched the top job. His swearing-in ceremony is likely to be moved up so he can quickly meet the German Chancellor ahead of the G8 summit in Washington.
And that will be that inauguration on May the 15th. A question on Twitter, I'll put it to you, Jim Shields. Considering Hollande's family background, I'd be interested to know when and how he got into socialism.
Well, as a student in the mid-1970s, so 1974, he was a volunteer helper, I think, for François Mitterrand's second run.
His mom was a school teacher and his dad a doctor?
A doctor, and a doctor with, reportedly, far-right proclivities. So Hollande took a quite different political course. So having helped Mitterrand to lose in 1974. That was where Giscard d'Estaing just pipped him at the post. He then joined the Socialist Party in 1979 and was quickly, once Mitterrand was elected in 1981, he was quickly talent spotted as a bright young thing and absorbed into the socialist machinery as a sort of special advisor and disappeared, in a sense, into the works of the party. And that's where he's really spent most of his political career, an insider.
Yeah. And sticking with the caramel pudding theme, Steve, in a mid-April New York Times Magazine piece entitled The Soft Middle of François Hollande, you point out that in that piece there were 2 striking features that I saw. First, this quote, "To be elected, it's necessary to have been beaten. To be loved, it's necessary to have suffered." politicians often brag about the knocks they overcome on the way to the top, but that turn of phrase, it's so, I don't know how to put it, French.
It's very French, and it rings very well in a country where people are Catholic by culture but don't go to church. I mean, there's this sense of perseverance through travails, a sort of Calvary, all the insults suffered, one emerges stronger. He himself describes his personality is hardened by what he'd gone through, and hardened by his father, who actually ran for the local council for the National Front, and with whom he had very difficult times. I mean, his father in May 68 moved to Neuilly because he thought that the riots were the precursor for a Soviet invasion of France. So that's the kind of reaction he's had. I mean, I think personally he's a man at home with his soul, and I think he's quite happy with his new partner as well.
I was going to say, that was the second point that I was going to bring up in your story, was Valérie Trévalère, a journalist with the French news magazine Paris Match. She's omnipresent in you're interviewing him, and she's there all the time.
Yeah. She's been taking care of him. She's been with him every step. She's been feeding him honey lozenges for his throat. She's been making little asides from time to time. Now, she's a little shy of this new role. I think, we saw her yesterday in Toul, and she was a little uncomfortable and rather stressed. But and they're going to have to figure out how to manage it. But in his personal life, his friends describe him as extremely happy, which is important because he's going to have enough pressure.
Ulrika, when you look at this, and again, you explain this to foreigners, he's the father of 4 children of the candidate who ran last time around. They break up, and he's with somebody different. It's a hard story to tell sometimes, too.
Absolutely. It would never happen in Germany that a couple get this far in politics. And it's very weird, seen from Germany. But there's also a big interest. Also, there was a big interest in Carla Bruni. That went so far that the German newspaper even copied the Canard Enchaîné, and they had like a column, so-called column by Carla Bruni. So there was a lot of interest in the private life of Sarkozy. And I think people will only realize now that actually, Hollande was former partner of Ségolène Royal, because he wasn't really known until now. And people are just, they just can't believe it, really.
I must say, I sometimes ask myself if having a complicated, amorous life is a requirement to be a French president.
Patrick Vignal, maybe you have the answer to that.
I don't know. What's interesting is that Sarkozy was actually the first French president to have been divorced. And now François Hollande
while in office.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And François Hollande might be the first one not to be married. So it's interesting. So we're making progress. I don't know what the next one will do for us. But
And what about the role of, I guess, I don't know if we can call her the first lady, the first partner to be?
I don't know. I don't think she knows herself what she's going into. She's saying that she still wants to be independent. She still wants to work as a journalist. It's difficult, really. I don't know what kind of first lady she will be. I don't know. I don't think she knows.
President Hollande, by the way, will have to hit the ground running for, even though French bonds this Monday trading at their strongest in 7 months. The outside world, it seems, unfazed for now about his election. Other issues are concentrating the minds. The Greek general election, raising what one newspaper in Athens called the nightmare of ungovernability, spooking the stock market there. It was down 7% at one point during the day. You were mentioning, Jim Shields, about how the problems are going to come fast and furious.
They are, and I worry just ever so slightly for François Hollande about the narrowness of his victory, because in the first round it was the tightest, the closest run thing in the history of presidential voting under the Fifth Republic. In the second round it was the second closest, and if you add in the spoilt ballots and the blank votes, he didn't actually come away with a clear majority of those who turned out to vote. Now, it's getting past the post that counts, but there is a more than symbolic importance, I think, about having a clearer margin than that. I was also struck by the results of an Ipsos poll published in today's Le Monde, where 55% of his support base voted for him because he was not Sarkozy, and 45% because he was François Hollande. So there are difficulties here that he has to now move beyond, but I think it suggests a precariously flimsy base to be setting out from.
But Patrick Vignal, there is the momentum that carries over from the presidential election to the legislative elections.
Yeah, they are. And the polls you were mentioning are also suggesting that he's heading for quite a comfortable victory at the parliamentary election. And that's a tradition in France, because the parliamentary election coming just after the presidential election, normally voters make sure that the president has quite a comfortable majority. And then another thing is, if he has a wide majority, he will be not only, socialists will only have the presidency, they'll also control the upper house, the lower house, most regions in France, about 2/3 of French towns. There is quite a solid basis to work on.
And about 2/3 of departments.
Exactly,
so they will have almost a monopoly on power.
Stephen Erlinger, as we speak, the Greek centre-right leader Antonios Samaras saying he's unable to form a coalition government in Greece. Again, the problems for François Hollande in France and all over France are going to come long before those legislative elections take place next month.
Well, this is right, and he has to be careful, because he can't compromise too soon, or he'll undercut his performance in the June votes. I think what the markets are really worried about is an ungovernable Greece. I mean, the two main parties in Greece have gone from about 79% of the vote to 35%. They've both been clobbered. One's conservative, one's socialist. They can't form a majority. Everyone else is against the austerity deal and the bailout deal. So, the Greeks will have to figure something out. But the big question is, if there's chaos in Greece, will it pull down the rest of the Eurozone deal? And that probably is a bigger challenge than anything François Hollande will ever say to Angela Merkel.
And how does he handle it at this point? Because it's this weird period of flux, isn't it? Between, again, the inauguration's the 15th. You mentioned at the outset he's going to have a sit-down with Barack Obama in Washington. There's going to be a meeting at Camp David. There's going to be a summit in Chicago. All these things are going to happen before he has that mandate that Patrick was describing from the legislative elections.
That's true. And while he has basically a temporary government, because it won't have been ratified by the new legislature, I think he will step carefully. I mean, one has the feeling that in Europe, the question is not just growth, but time. I mean, can people be cut a little more slack in the debt limits that they have? What is so precious about the year 2013 to get down to certain limits? I mean, why do they have to be at 3% by a certain period? I mean, can't that be extended?
All right, so the question of the rules and the reaction today from the German Chancellor will be picking up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. This is the France 24 debate.